I sat down at the small table, the one that used to be too cramped for all of us. There was a chipped porcelain bowl in front of me, filled with plain white rice that had gone cold hours ago. I didn't bother reheating it. I reached for the little bottle of soy sauce, the cheap kind I used to refuse to buy when the kids were still here because they deserved better. I tipped it over gently, letting the dark liquid soak into the rice, staining it unevenly. That was dinner. That was all. I didn't even have a vegetable. Not because I couldn't afford one, just because I didn't care enough to make the effort anymore. It wasn't always like this. Once the smell of my cooking would pull them out of their rooms like magnets. They'd come crashing down the stairs. Someone would always be yelling about who was getting the drumstick or who took the last spring roll. I used to stand over that stove with pride. I cooked with heart, with intention. Each dish had meaning. Now I cook for one, and even that feels like a performance I've stopped auditioning for. I never thought I'd miss the chaos. The way the rice cooker clicked open, and someone would immediately lift the lid to steal a spoonful. The way they'd hover over the sink with plates half finished, asking if there was more soup. Even the mess, the scattered napkins, the stained tablecloth, the occasional tantrum about someone refusing to eat vegetables. It was noise, yes, but it was proof that I mattered, that I was needed, that I was seen. These days, silence has a weight. It's not peaceful. It presses against my ribs. No one fights over food anymore. No one picks around the mushrooms or tells me I added too much chili. I eat what's easy, what's bland, what's left. Soy sauce is quick. It adds salt. Not flavor, not warmth, just salt. And sometimes that's all I feel left with. I remember when they moved out one by one. Each time they promised they'd come back often. We'll visit every weekend, Ma. You'll be sick of us, just wait. I believed them. I set places for them at the table long after they stopped showing up. I'd cooked too much, thinking maybe this would be the Sunday someone came home. Then last month I stopped. I stood in the kitchen, spoon in hand, staring into the empty pot of rice I hadn't cooked, and I said to myself, enough. Not in anger, not in tears, just enough. I sat down and took the leftover rice from the fridge, poured a dash of soy sauce, and told myself, this is dinner now. This is what you deserve. The saddest part isn't the meal. It's how familiar the silence has become. How I don't reach for an extra bowl anymore. How I no longer glance at the clock wondering who's running late. How I stopped putting out chopsticks for anyone but me. Sometimes I whisper their names as I chew, not like a prayer, like a memory. A sound I don't want to forget, like stirring soup for ghosts, like seasoning rice with absence. Each chair at the table still has its place, 6 of them even now. I've thought about giving some away, donating the extras, maybe even folding them up and storing them in the garage, but I can't. It would feel like erasing people who still walk the earth. People I carried inside my body or in my arms, who once couldn't go a day without calling out for me. The chairs have memories etched into them. One still has a scratch from when my oldest slammed it back after storming out angry that I said no to something. Another has a leg that wobbles. I always meant to fix it, but it became a joke in the family. Whoever got that chair had to sit very still while eating. The cushion on the far end is flatter than the others because my husband always sat there. For decades, he'd tap his chopsticks on the edge of his bowl and ask if the fish was ready yet. That sound used to irritate me. Now I would give anything to hear it again. But none of them sit here anymore. The chairs stand like wooden sentinels around the table, watching me chew in silence. They've become part of the stillness, inanimate reminders of lives that once orbited mine. When I was younger, I imagined I'd grow old surrounded by family. I thought I'd be cooking for grandkids by now, telling stories over bowls of noodles, holding hands during grace. Instead, I pass each day with only the creak of these chairs for company. I dust them once a week, not because they're used, but because they deserve not to fade. I smooth the cushions. I tuck them in like children I no longer have to wake. It's my ritual. I keep them clean just in case. Even though the doorbell hasn't rung in weeks, even though every time I hear a car outside, it's never one of theirs. There was a time this table felt too small. Elbows knocked into each other. Plates jostled for space. I used to scold them for putting their phones beside their food. I worried they'd choke from talking with their mouths full. Now I'd sit through all of it again twice over, just to hear them laugh across from me. Sometimes I imagine them here. I close my eyes and picture them as they were one peeling oranges, one scooping rice for everyone else, one pretending not to like the tofu even though I knew she did. I can still hear their voices layered over one another so loud I couldn't finish a thought without someone interrupting. It was overwhelming, exhausting. It was alive. Now I take quiet bites and let my chewing echo off the walls. The sound of my own swallowing startles me. I haven't heard my name spoken aloud in days, not even from the television. Just the slow scrape of my spoon against the bowl, the rustle of the napkin I still fold neatly on my lap like someone might be watching. The chairs don't judge, but they do remember. They carry the imprints of lives that once mattered here. And maybe that's why I keep them to remind myself that I didn't imagine it all, that there really was love here once, that I didn't cook for nothing, that I wasn't always this alone. I used to be the warmth in the kitchen, not just the hands that stirred the soup or flipped the pancakes, but the center of everything. The smell of sautéed onions, the hiss of oil meeting garlic, the clatter of lids and ladles, that was my symphony. I made it all happen. I was the reason their stomachs were full and their hearts felt safe. And yet somehow over the years I vanished in the steam. Cooking was never just about food. It was how I showed love, how I said I see you without needing to ask about their day. A second helping meant I understood they'd had a rough one. An extra egg in the soup meant I noticed they looked tired. I remembered what each child hated, what each one loved. I knew who wanted crunchy edges and who didn't like green onions. No one taught me that. I just paid attention. It used to matter. Back then, they came home hungry, not just for food, for comfort, for the smell of something simmering, for the familiarity of a pot left on low heat, waiting for whoever came home late. And I waited too. I never started eating until the last one had walked through the door. Sometimes I'd wait until 10, even 11, just so they didn't have to eat alone. Now no one waits for me. They used to ask what was cooking the moment they stepped inside. "Is it your curry, Ma? Did you make the sticky ribs again?" The way their eyes lit up, the way they hovered around the kitchen like bees, I lived for that. And it made me strong. It made me feel needed. I was never the loudest voice in the house, but when I cooked, I spoke in spices, in textures, in warmth. My kitchen was my temple. I didn't care if my back hurt or if my feet swelled. I would peel, chop, stir, and clean until everyone was fed. And somehow, when I saw them smile with full mouths, I forgot I was tired. I wonder sometimes when it changed. Was it gradual? Was it the first time someone didn't say thank you? Or the time they came in, took their plate, and went straight back to their room without a word I should have known then? I should have said something, but I told myself they were busy, stressed, growing. I excused their silence. I seasoned it with grace. Eventually, they stopped coming to the table altogether. They ate when they wanted, not when I served. They warmed things up themselves or ordered in. The kitchen I had built with my love and labor became a convenience store open 24/7, with no soul left in the shelves. Now the kitchen is clean, too clean. Nothing simmers, nothing splatters. The spice jars gather dust. The pans haven't felt a flame in days. It's not a temple anymore. It's a museum of effort, of care, of unacknowledged love. I opened the freezer yesterday and found some soup I'd made months ago. I remember putting it there because one of them had said they might visit, and I thought, let me save this for them. I don't know how long I've been saving things for people who never come. And the cruel part. They think I don't mind. They think I've earned rest. They say, you don't have to cook anymore. Ma, just relax. But it was never a chore. It was my language. Taking it away was like putting a hand over my mouth and calling it kindness. I walk into that kitchen now, and I feel like a ghost, a woman who once held the center, and now just touches countertops out of habit. I open the rice cooker and close it again even when it's empty. I reach for pots I no longer need. I still keep the big ladle in the drawer, the one I used to serve soup in for 6 bowls. It feels wrong to throw it away, like admitting no one is coming back. I was the warmth in the kitchen, and now the kitchen is cold. Birthdays used to mean balloons, streamers, candles, frosting smudged on cheeks. I would spend the entire week leading up to each child's special day, thinking about what to cook, what little surprise to hide in their meal. Even when money was tight, I found a way. I made shaped pancakes in the morning, baked cakes in borrowed pans, cut fruits into hearts. I made a home feel like magic. Now birthdays pass like any other day, mine especially. Last year I woke up, stared at the calendar, and whispered to myself, it's today. I didn't expect a party. I didn't expect a cake. But maybe a call, a message. Just a single voice remembering that once I gave life. By noon there was nothing. Not even the usual forwarded happy birthday meme. I went into the kitchen, pulled out a carton of milk, and saw that it had expired the day before. I laughed not because it was funny, but because somehow that sour smell felt like the most honest gift I'd received in years. It was proof something had aged, even if no one cared to notice. I sat at the table alone, eating 2 crackers and some old tea. I could have cooked myself something made my favorite porridge, maybe, but it felt hollow. Why celebrate myself if no one else thought I was worth remembering? I used to make such a fuss over their birthdays. Decorations, little notes hidden in their lunchboxes, meals shaped like animals. I stayed up late sewing little pouches of candy or handwriting wishes. They used to beam. They used to run into my arms, sticky with cake, shouting, "Thank you, Mama." I'd be exhausted but glowing. My back would ache from standing all day, but I'd fall asleep smiling, knowing I made their day beautiful. The first time they forgot my birthday, I brushed it off. Maybe they were overwhelmed, busy. The second time, I tried to remind them gently the week before. I brought it up in a story, hinted at it in passing. Oh, the weather reminds me of my birthday when I turned 40. They nodded, smiled, changed the subject. By the 3rd year, I didn't say anything. I didn't want to beg for attention. I told myself I didn't care. But I did. I cared too much. I sat at the window that evening, watching the light change, thinking of the years I made the world sparkle for them, and how they let my day slip past like a forgotten spoon in the sink. I know birthdays are just dates. I know people get busy. But I also know that remembering someone's birth isn't about calendars. It's about love. It's about pausing your day to say, you're still here. You still matter. I haven't stopped being grateful you were born. And when no one says that to you, when your phone stays silent, when the doorbell never rings, when the cake goes unbaked, you start to wonder if maybe your presence no longer feels like a celebration to anyone. Now I keep a tiny cupcake in the freezer. I bought it for myself 2 years ago, telling myself I'd light a candle and sing even if it was just for me. but I never did. It sits there still covered in frost, like a memory I'm not sure I want to revisit. They don't mean to forget me. I know that, but forgetting still hurts, especially when you once remembered them so fiercely, so faithfully. I used to write their birth dates on the inside of my cupboard door just in case I ever lost my memory, as if losing those dates would be like losing part of myself. Now I wonder if they ever wrote mine down, or if it's just one more thing that faded as they moved on. I found the last grocery list I ever wrote, tucked between the pages of an old cookbook. The handwriting was crooked, rushed, scrawled, while I stirred something with one hand and held the paper steady with the other. It said things like 2 heads, garlic fish sauce, baby bok choy, and then toward the bottom, ice cream strawberry for her. I stared at it for a long time, not even remembering which her I meant. Maybe my granddaughter. Maybe one of my daughters. I used to write little notes on the sides of those lists, reminders of who liked what, who needed soup, who had a cold. I shopped not for a household, but for a family each person held carefully in my mind like a separate recipe. Now my lists are mental, short and silent. 12 eggs, 1 instant noodle cup, soy sauce, maybe a fruit if it's on sale. I don't need much. I don't want much. The act of shopping used to bring joy, planning a meal around someone else's smile, anticipating the sound of chopsticks tapping the bowl. These days I walk slowly through the aisles, eyes scanning out of habit more than need. I've forgotten what it feels like to shop with excitement. Once the cart would be overflowing, bags of rice in bulk, lemongrass stalks bundled tightly, sauces I knew how to balance by taste, not measurement. I'd choose with care this brand of tofu, that cut of pork. My hands moved with purpose. My heart was in it. I was feeding a story, a lineage, a home. Now I carry 1 small plastic basket, never more. I can't remember the last time I needed a full cart, and I don't like the looks cashiers give me, not unkind, just indifferent. I'm just another old woman buying for one. They don't know who I used to be, the woman who once held her family's hunger like a sacred duty. They just see me with my packets and my coupons and my silence. I used to think about what new dish I could try just to surprise them. I once spent hours looking up how to make a complicated braised dish from my mother's region, because my son mentioned it once. He said, "Remember when Grandma used to make that thing with the sticky glaze?" I took it as a challenge. I tested, tweaked, called relatives for advice. When I finally got it right and served it to him, he took 1 bite, said, "Oh, wow," and then went back to his phone. That wow held me for days. Even that much acknowledgement became rare. It was enough for a while. But now, no one's coming home for dinner. I don't need to learn new recipes. I don't need to remember who doesn't like cilantro. My shopping habits have shrunk with my relevance. And the cruelest shift, I've started forgetting what I liked. I never bought snacks for myself. They always came first. I didn't buy desserts I loved, unless someone else loved them too. I skipped cuts of meat I preferred because they were too expensive for 6 mouths. But now I stand in front of the things I once craved. Sesame balls, fried anchovies, soft tofu pudding, and I just walk past. The appetite is gone, not from my stomach, but from my heart. Last week I bought a can of sardines. I hadn't eaten sardines in years. I used to hate them. But I bought it because it was easy, cheap, and it made sense for someone like me, someone who no longer planned meals, only solved hunger. I didn't even eat it that night. I just placed it in the cupboard next to the old soy sauce and half-used rice. That's what it becomes, I think. You don't cook. You solve hunger. You don't plan. You survive. And that list I found, I folded it gently and tucked it into my drawer. Not because I needed it, but because it reminded me of who I was. A woman who fed, remembered, anticipated loved, who once bought strawberries just to see someone else smile. My apron still hangs behind the kitchen door. It's old now, a faded yellow with frayed edges, and a pocket that used to hold everything from tasting spoons to handwritten recipes. The fabric smells like old garlic and distant years, like the warmth of dinners long gone. I haven't worn it in months, maybe years. Still, I leave it there. I can't bring myself to take it down. As long as it hangs, it feels like maybe I'm still the kind of woman who gets asked, "What's for dinner?" That apron was a witness to decades. It caught flour from birthday cakes, grease from late-night stir-fries, and splashes from soups made during flu seasons. I'd tie it on every evening like armor ready to face another round of chaos and love. It made me feel capable, steady. It was part of my rhythm put on the apron start. The rice listened for the familiar footsteps rushing in from school or work or life. Now it just hangs there unmoved, a little too clean, the pocket too empty. No little fingers tugging at it from below asking to taste something early. No one to say, "You're wearing your apron, so I guess something smells good." No one even notices when I'm not in the kitchen anymore. Some days I still reach for it out of habit. I'll go to make a cup of tea and my hand will drift toward that loop behind the door, and then I stop myself. What's the point of putting it on if there's no mess to protect from no one, to serve no memory, to keep alive through flavor? It used to be that wearing the apron meant I was holding the house together. My children thought the world revolved around their own lives, but I knew better. I was the invisible thread, the one who made sure dinner was ready even after a long day of work, who fed them even when they yelled at me, who anticipated hunger like a sixth sense. They never saw it, of course. Children rarely do. I wonder now, did they think the food made itself, that rice steamed itself to perfection, that meat softened on its own timed perfectly between errands and heartbreaks? I wore that apron through arguments, birthdays, celebrations, and lonely nights when I cooked, just to fill the silence. Even when I cried, I still cooked. My tears have seasoned more meals than salt ever did. But eventually, the cooking slowed. The need shrank. First it was fewer mouths, then fewer visits. They told me to rest, to take it easy. They said, "You've done enough, Ma," as if love had a stopping point, as if feeding the people I carried inside me was a burden instead of a blessing. Now when I cook, it's rare and small, a bowl of congee, a boiled egg, some leftover greens, and I do it quietly without the apron. I don't need protection from oil splashes anymore. There's no chaos to defend against, just silence, just stillness. But I can't take it down. That apron, it means too much. It's the last piece of evidence that I was once the keeper of meals, the orchestrator of nourishment, the quiet engine of an entire household's rhythm. Taking it down would be like closing a book I'm still not ready to finish. Sometimes late at night I pass the kitchen to get a glass of water. The moonlight hits the fabric just right, and for a second it looks like someone is standing there. Like I could reach out, tie it on, and become her again, the woman who fed 6 people with her hands, her heart, her time. But then the light shifts and I remember. It's just cloth, just history, just a ghost of who I used to be. Still, I leave it hanging, because maybe, just maybe, someone will come through that door one day and ask Ma what's for dinner. And maybe in that moment I'll put it on again. Not because I have to, but because I still know how. They always say they're busy. Every time I call, every time I text, it's the same line. "Sorry, Ma, things have been hectic. Work's been crazy lately. I'll come by soon, I promise." I nod even when they can't see me, because what else can I do? I say, "Of course I understand." because that's the kind of mother I've always been, the one who understands, the one who waits. But each time those words reach me, something small inside me shrinks a little further. I used to believe those promises. I used to mark my calendar when someone said they'd visit on Sunday. I'd clean the house, buy their favorite snacks, maybe even make that braised pork they used to love as kids. But Sunday would come and go, and so would the silence. At first I'd make excuses for them. Maybe they got caught in traffic. Maybe something urgent came up. But deep down I knew. I always knew. Busy has become the softest rejection. It doesn't slam the door. It doesn't shout. It just fades out like a radio drifting into static. You can't blame it. You can't argue with it. And it leaves you there holding the phone, holding your breath, holding on to a hope that keeps slipping through your fingers. I used to think love meant patience, that if I waited long enough they'd come back around, that motherhood meant staying soft, staying ready. But no one tells you that patience has a cost, that each unanswered call takes something from you, that understanding too much can start to feel like disappearing. I can hear it in their voices now, the fatigue, the distraction. They call sometimes, usually out of guilt. The conversations are brief. How are you, Ma? Did you take your medicine? Okay, I have to go, love you. I say love you too, even though they've already hung up. What I miss isn't just their presence. It's their attention. The way they used to really look at me, listen to me. The way they'd come into the kitchen and sit beside me chatting while I chopped vegetables, offering to help, even if they didn't mean it. Those moments weren't big, but they meant everything. They made me feel human. Now I feel like a chore on someone's to-do list, a quick call before a meeting, a name on a calendar that keeps getting rescheduled. I know their lives are full, careers, children, deadlines. I remember those years they blur together, filled with rushing and worry. I know what it's like to juggle too much. That's why I forgive so easily. That's why I say, don't worry about me. But inside I'm screaming into silence, wondering when I became so easy to set aside. Sometimes I think about what would happen if I didn't call, if I stopped sending those gentle messages, just checking in. Hope you're eating well. Love you. Would they notice? Would they wonder if I was okay? Or would the silence just settle over them, like a soft fog they never even feel? I don't want to be dramatic. I don't want to guilt them. That's not my way. But I'm tired of pretending I don't feel this ache, this quiet grief that comes not from being hated, but from being gently forgotten. One night I sat by the phone, fingers hovering over the screen, wanting to send a message that said, I miss you, but I deleted it. I didn't want to seem needy. I didn't want to be the one always reaching, so I just sat there staring at the clock, as if the ticking hands could fill the space where a voice should have been. They say they're busy, and I say I understand, because I do. But understanding doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean I don't cry into my tea some nights, remembering the days when I was their entire world, and wondering how I became just another item they keep postponing. The big soup pot hasn't left its shelf in over a year. Once, it never got the chance to cool completely. Someone was always hungry. Someone was always sick. Someone was always bringing home a friend who stayed for dinner. I used to joke that the pot was my 7th child. It held so much, gave so much, and never asked for anything in return. Now it sits clean and dry in the cabinet above the stove, too large for the life I lead. I can't even remember the last time I reached for it. Cooking for one doesn't require a pot that size. You don't need to simmer bones for hours when no one else is waiting for soup. I boil water in a small saucepan now, just enough for a single portion of noodles. Sometimes I add an egg. Sometimes I don't bother. That pot was the heart of our home. The clang of the lid, the cloud of steam that fogged the kitchen windows, the wooden spoon resting against its rim, it was all part of our rhythm. I stirred it like a ritual seasoning with memory tasting with love. They never asked how I did it. They just showed up, bowls in hand, mouths open, hearts warm. They say cooking for others is a way of saying, I want you to live. That pot held years of that message. Even when I was tired, even when I was sad, I filled it. Because feeding someone is the closest thing to forgiveness I know. And maybe I thought by feeding them well I could keep them close. Now the kitchen doesn't smell like anything. The air is still. That pot hasn't heard a whisper in months. I opened the cabinet last week and stared at it, half tempted to donate it. But I couldn't. Giving it away would feel like giving up on someone ever needing me that much again. I remember when my youngest got the flu and couldn't keep anything down. I stayed up all night making broth just clear enough, just salty enough, gently warming it in that pot every few hours. I remember the sound of the ladle hitting the side, the soft clink of the porcelain spoon as I brought it to their lips. I don't even think they remember that night. But I do. Every detail. That's the thing about motherhood. Your love lives in unnoticed places, in the bottom of a soup pot, in the last piece of meat you quietly don't eat, so someone else can have it, in the patience you stir into the broth. Some nights when I'm feeling brave, I boil water just to feel like something's happening in the kitchen. The pot stays on the shelf, but I use a smaller pan and watch the bubbles rise. Pretend I'm making something for someone who's about to walk through the door. They never do. And yet I can't bring myself to stop hoping. That pot, it's more than steel and scratches. It's a memory, a promise, a monument to all the times I said I love you without speaking. It deserves better than dust. But right now, that's all I have to offer. There was a time when the clatter of chopsticks filled the house. 12 of them at once, clicking against porcelain, scraping bowls, clean tapping against one another in the rush to grab a favorite piece. It was a joyful noise, messy and full of life. Arguments broke out over who got the last shrimp. Someone always asked for more rice. Someone always spilled soy sauce. Now I eat in near silence. 2 chopsticks, mine, slow, deliberate. Careful not to drop anything, not because I fear mess, but because I dread the sound of something falling in a house so quiet. Even the way I hold my chopsticks has changed. My grip is slower, my hands stiffer. I don't reach across the table anymore. There's no need. Everything I eat fits in one bowl. I don't bother with side dishes, not anymore. The effort feels pointless. I used to set out bowls and spoons like a ritual. Napkins folded just so. I'd call out, "Come eat while it's hot," and no one would come the first time. I always had to shout again or pretend to be annoyed, but that was part of it, the dance of getting them to the table, the hum of life gathering around food. Back then, eating meant connection. We shared more than just meals. We passed stories. We laughed. We argued. We built something invisible held together by rice and soup and routine. Now I chew slowly and listen to the refrigerator hum. I set my bowl down gently so the clink doesn't echo too loudly. I eat with the TV off. It feels wrong to fill the room with fake voices. I'd rather sit with the real silence. Sometimes I close my eyes and pretend I can hear them. The chopsticks, the laughter, the joking. I can still see their faces, younger, messier, lit up with hunger and joy. I remember the way they leaned into the table, the way they reached over one another like it was nothing. I used to scold them, use the serving spoon, but inside I was smiling. Because they were there. Because I had fed them. Now when I hear other families in restaurants, kids complaining, couples bickering over the bill, I feel a strange kind of envy. Not for the food, but for the noise, for the evidence of being surrounded. The quiet after dinner is the hardest. The way the bowl sits empty in the sink, not part of a pile, not part of a rhythm. Just one bowl, one pair of chopsticks. I used to wash dishes late into the night. I'd sigh at the mess, but secretly feel proud. The leftovers meant someone ate well. The grease meant they enjoyed it. Now my dish rack stays empty. One cup, one plate. I could use paper if I wanted, there's barely anything to clean. But I still use the porcelain bowls, the good ones. Because somewhere in me I still believe I'm worth it, that even if no one's watching, I deserve to eat from something real. I wonder if they know what silence sounds like. I wonder if they think of me when they eat, when they use chopsticks, when they taste something I once made for them. Or has the memory of my table already faded from their lives? They have their own families now, their own chaos, their own noise. I'm glad for that, truly. But sometimes I wish they'd remember that I don't need much. Not gifts, not grand visits, just the clatter of chopsticks, just a seat filled, just a voice saying, "Is there more?" Because the silence is loud, louder than they'll ever know. Takeout menus used to be a last resort, a rare indulgence when I was too tired to cook or wanted to treat the kids with something they thought was special. Now they're stacked neatly in a drawer beside the phone, worn and curling at the edges. I don't use them often, but they're there just in case I can't summon the energy to prepare even a bowl of rice. My children send me money for food sometimes. Just order something nice for yourself, Ma. They say it like it's a solution, like it fills the same space that used to be occupied by asking, "How was your lunch today?" or "Did you eat something warm?" I know they mean well. I know they think they're helping, and in a way, they are. I'm grateful for the help, truly. But money is not the same as care. A delivery meal is not the same as a question spoken with love. The food arrives in plastic boxes, too hot in some places, too cold in others. I open them alone. I eat them alone. There's no warmth in it beyond the microwave. What I crave isn't the food, it's the thought. A small text at noon, "Ma, did you eat today?" would be worth more than the most expensive meal they could ever send. Because then I'd know I was still in someone's mind, still on someone's list. I once fed them with my own hands when they were sick, when they were sad, when they were too tired or too picky or too young to say thank you. I watched over their plates, noticed when they barely ate, asked if something was wrong. I didn't need to be told. I knew, because I was paying attention. Now they don't ask me what I eat. They assume I've figured it out, and I have in the barest, most mechanical way. There are nights I go to bed having eaten only a boiled egg and a cracker. Not because I didn't have food, but because I couldn't think of a reason to make more effort than that. The worst is when I lie. When they ask, "What did you have for dinner, Ma?" once in a blue moon out of some passing curiosity or guilt, and I say, "Oh, I made something simple," and laugh like it's no big deal. I don't tell them the truth, that I opened the fridge and closed it again, that I stared at a half-empty shelf and felt nothing. Takeout is supposed to be a treat, but it becomes another symbol of detachment when it arrives without a voice to go with it. A bag dropped off at the gate, a meal that feeds the stomach but leaves the heart hollow. One night they ordered me a fancy meal, sushi, miso soup, little sides in neat compartments. It arrived beautifully. I sat down, lit a candle just to pretend the moment had meaning. But halfway through the meal, I began to cry. I didn't even know why at first. The food was good, the room was warm, but it felt like a performance, like I was pretending someone cared when all I had was the receipt and the driver's brief smile. There is no conversation in takeout. No one asks how it tastes. No one takes the last piece and offers it to me. No one pretends to hate pickled ginger just to make me laugh. The ritual is gone. The act of sharing, gone. They think money replaces presence. But what I miss is not being fed, it's feeding. It's being part of the process, the exchange, the care. I don't want to be taken care of like a task to be checked off. I want to be loved out loud with small things. A call, a question, a pause. Even now, if one of them just asked, "Are you eating well, Ma?" I think I'd make a whole meal from scratch again, just to feel that I still mattered at the table. I saved my favorite recipes for them. Not written down, not printed, just tucked safely in the corners of my mind and hands. They lived in the way I folded the dough, the way I tilted the pan just slightly when the oil started to dance, the way I could tell when something was done just by the smell. These recipes weren't written in words. They were written in love, in time, in sacrifice. And I always thought when the time came they'd want to learn, that one day one of them would say, "Ma, can you teach me how to make that?" That they'd come into the kitchen, apron already tied, notebook in hand, ready to write down everything I had spent a lifetime perfecting. But no one asked. Not once. They liked to eat, yes. They complimented the dishes. They groaned with happiness after a good meal. They packed leftovers into containers and licked their spoons. But when it came to learning to carrying these things forward, it was always next time. When I'm less busy. You'll teach me someday, right? Someday never came. And now I realize the family cookbook ends with me. There are flavors they'll never taste again after I'm gone. That crispy, caramelized edge on my pork belly, the delicate bitterness I coaxed from mustard greens, the exact balance of sweet and salt in my fish sauce dip, all of it fading like fog. It breaks my heart more than I ever expected. Not because of pride, but because each dish was a story, a memory, a moment that could have lived beyond me. And now those stories are slowly dying in a woman who is still alive. I used to imagine teaching my grandchildren how to make dumplings, their small hands, clumsy flour on their cheeks. I imagined showing them how to taste broth with the back of a spoon. How to listen to the rice to know when it's done. I imagine laughter in the kitchen the same way it used to be when I was a girl watching my own mother. But they're too busy. The idea of learning from me seems quaint, outdated. They have YouTube now, instant recipes, meal kits. Why learn to slow cook a broth for 6 hours when you can microwave a package in 3 minutes? And I stay silent. I don't ask anymore, because I know what it feels like to offer something sacred and watch it be dismissed as unnecessary. I've tried to write things down a few times, but my hands get tired, and there's no one to hand the paper to. Recipes need a reader, a keeper, and I don't know if I have one anymore. There's a little tin box in the cupboard with some scraps of paper, old shopping lists, pieces of envelopes with notes scribbled during moments of inspiration. They're coded in my own shorthand. No one else would understand them. Add sugar last, wait for the bubbling whisper. Don't forget the vinegar, she always liked it sharp. More ginger if he's coughing again. They're not just instructions, they're history. And it hurts to think that when I'm gone, someone might open that tin and throw it away, not knowing it held more than scraps. It held a legacy. I don't need to be remembered with monuments or framed photos, but I hoped quietly, secretly, that I'd be remembered in a dish, that someone would say, "This tastes just like how Ma used to make it," that my love would live on in a simmer, a stir, a spoonful. But maybe it won't. Maybe my recipes will disappear with me, and maybe that's what time does. It erases mothers in quiet, practical ways. But for now, I still remember. I still hold the taste of everything I ever made. I still carry the smell of broth and salt and care in my sleeves. I still stir with memory even if no one's watching. and I whisper the steps aloud as I cook, as if someone might hear. Holidays used to mean cooking for days. My kitchen would glow with heat and smell every surface covered in bowls, trays, spoons, and cutting boards. The refrigerator was always too full, and I'd have to stack dishes on top of each other like a puzzle. I didn't mind. It was the only kind of chaos I welcomed, the kind that meant people were coming home. I used to wake up early on holiday mornings long before anyone else stirred. I'd start the soup first, because it always needed the most time. Then the rice, the dumplings, the roasted meats, the desserts. There was a rhythm to it, a sacredness. Each dish had a reason, a memory. I'd hum to myself while chopping, tasting, adjusting, already imagining the look on their faces when they took that first bite. Now the holidays come and go with barely a flicker of warmth. I still try. The week before, I'll clean the house a little more carefully. I'll walk slowly through the grocery store, picking up ingredients I used to buy in bulk. I'll stand in the produce section holding a bundle of chives, wondering if anyone will notice if I bother to make that scallion pancake they used to fight over. But I always end up putting most things back, because they don't come. Not anymore. They have their own homes now, their own in-laws, their own traditions. They tell me, Ma, it's just easier if we stay local, or we're so tired from traveling last year, or let's video call instead. And I smile. I always smile. Of course I understand. So I heat up leftovers, whatever's still in the fridge. Sometimes I'll make one dish from the old days, just one, just to feel like I'm still part of the tradition. But it's not the same. It's never the same when no one else is there to eat it. One year I set the table anyway, just out of habit. I laid out 3 bowls, not even 6, just 3. Maybe that was me trying to be realistic. I cooked a little of everything, thinking someone might surprise me. Maybe they'd show up late. Maybe they'd knock on the door with an apology and a smile. No one came. I sat down at the table and looked at the food growing cold. I took one bite and felt the tears rise, not because I was sad, but because I realized I didn't taste anything. It all felt numb, like cooking for a dream that had already faded. The news was on in the background, some cheerful segment about family gatherings, clinking glasses, laughter. I turned it off. I couldn't bear to hear joy coming from somewhere else. Now on holidays, I don't try as hard. I make something simple. Rice, some pickled vegetables, a boiled egg, just enough to fill the stomach, not the soul. And yet a part of me still waits. I keep my phone charged. I check it more often. I tell myself I don't expect a call, but I do. I always do. It's strange the way time changes the meaning of celebration. When they were young, holidays were magic, because I made them so. The decorations, the food, the feeling I built, all of it with my hands. And now I wonder if they think it all just appeared, like it came from nowhere, like it will appear again, somewhere else, without me. They used to say, "No one makes this dish like you do, Ma," and I'd laugh, scold them for flattering me too much. But now I wonder if those words were just passing compliments, if they even remember what it tasted like. Because I do. I remember everything. And I still make it sometimes, just for me, even when no one is coming. There was a time I ate less so they could eat more, quietly, without ever being asked. I would pretend I was already full, push the best pieces onto their plates, act like I didn't like dessert, so they wouldn't feel guilty eating the last bite. It was instinct, not sacrifice in the way people dramatize it, but just natural. That's what mothers do. I remember serving meals and watching their faces as they took their first bites. That was the real nourishment for me, seeing their hunger satisfied, seeing their joy. Even when I was tired, even when we didn't have much, I'd find a way to make a meal stretch. A little more broth, a few more vegetables, less meat for me. I learned how to make small things feel like feasts. Back then, they never noticed, and I never needed them to. I didn't keep score. I just wanted them to have enough. I wanted them to feel full, feel loved, feel like the world was a little kinder because of what they found at home. But now that I eat alone, I find myself standing in front of the fridge with that same instinct, reaching for the smaller portion, the less appealing cut, the corner piece, even when no one else is here. And that's when it hits me I don't know how to eat for myself. For decades, I measured my hunger against theirs. If they were fed, I was content. If they were happy, I was satisfied. But when there's no one to feed, what do I do with this body, this appetite, this ritual? It's not just the food, it's what it meant. A warm bowl placed in front of someone was a way of saying, I'm here. I'm paying attention. I love you. When I gave them the bigger piece of fish, I was giving them part of myself. And now when I look at a table set for one, I don't know how to offer that same tenderness to myself. I try sometimes. I set the table neatly. I place a small flower in a jar. I warm the food with care, not just heat. I tell myself, this is for you. But it feels performative, hollow, like I'm playing a role I no longer remember how to inhabit. I used to go to bed a little hungry and still feel full. Now I eat what's left, and it tastes like nothing. I keep thinking of a memory one night when the power went out. I had only a little rice and some dried anchovies. I made it work. I lit candles. I told stories. The kids laughed and said it was the best dinner they'd ever had. They didn't know I hadn't eaten at all that night. I told them I'd already eaten while cooking. I hadn't. But their laughter, their joy, it filled me in a way no meal could. Now the power stays on, the fridge is stocked, but the hunger is louder. I realize in all those years I wasn't just feeding them. I was anchoring myself to a purpose, to a role, to a reason. And without them, I'm still trying to feed something, still trying to fill a space that no food can touch. I look at leftovers now and remember how I used to pack them into little containers labeled for each child, with reminders about which dish was spicier, which one had extra ginger for a sore throat. I still have a few of those containers. They sit empty in the cupboard, waiting, like me. Maybe I should throw them out, but I won't, because they remind me that once I was someone's comfort, someone's home. And even if I eat alone now, even if the food is plain and quiet, there's still a part of me that folds the napkin neatly, that places the bowl with care. Because once I fed the world. The night I didn't cook at all felt stranger than I expected, not just because the stove stayed cold or the sink stayed empty, but because it was the first time in 50 years that I didn't even think about what to make. It wasn't a decision. It wasn't rebellion. It just didn't happen. I had opened the fridge, looked at the eggs, the half-wilted greens, the container of leftover rice. My hand reached for them, as it always did, and then stopped in midair. There was no energy behind the motion, no sense of purpose. The idea of boiling water felt like too much, so I closed the fridge and sat back down. I told myself I'd eat later, but later came and went, and still I sat in my chair, hands folded in my lap, like a guest waiting to be served in a restaurant that no longer had staff. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I just felt blank. It wasn't about hunger. Hunger I could have solved. There were biscuits in the pantry, a banana on the counter, but I didn't want food. I wanted meaning. I wanted someone to ask, "What's for dinner, Ma?" and mean it. I wanted the spark that used to ignite when I knew someone was coming home, someone was expecting the warmth of a meal, the smell of something simmering. That night no one called, no one came. The hours stretched out long and hushed. The television buzzed in the background. but I couldn't follow the story. My eyes kept drifting toward the kitchen, toward the cold stove, the pot that hadn't been moved in days. I used to think that skipping a meal was unthinkable. Back then, I cooked through fevers, through heartbreak, through exhaustion. It was my way of holding things together, the house, the family, myself. Even when I couldn't control anything else, I could still dice onions, season soup, stir with steady hands. But that night, I did nothing, and no one noticed. That's what stayed with me the most, not the hunger, but the invisibility, that I could skip dinner, sit in silence, drift off in a chair, and it wouldn't ripple through anyone's world but mine. I think that's what loneliness really is. Not just being alone, but knowing that your absence doesn't disturb anyone's rhythm, that you can disappear into silence, and the world keeps spinning without pause. The next morning, I woke up lightheaded with a dull ache behind my eyes. I went to the kitchen, made a small bowl of congee, sprinkled some scallions on top. It tasted like regret and resignation. But still I ate, because I was still here. And maybe that's what strength looks like now. Not the cooking of feasts, not the performance of joy, but the quiet, tired decision to get up and eat anyway, even when no one's watching, even when it feels pointless. The night I didn't cook taught me something I didn't want to learn, that I've spent so many years feeding others. I forgot how to feed myself, not just with food, but with care, with tenderness, with worth. I don't want to become the kind of woman who disappears in her own kitchen. I don't want to be the ghost of a mother who once mattered only when she served. So now, even if it's just rice and soy sauce, I place it in a bowl I like. I sit down at the table, not the couch. I eat slowly. I don't scroll my phone. I don't turn on the TV. I just sit and eat. It's not the same. It will never be the same. But I'm still here, and I'm still eating. That has to mean something. I poured a little soy sauce over rice and thought maybe I've been seasoning silence all along. The dark liquid soaked into the grains, slowly leaving little trails, like tears on white cloth. I didn't bother to mix it. I just sat there watching, remembering how many times I'd done this exact thing when there was no time to cook, when we were too poor for meat, when the house was too loud for anything fancy. But back then, it wasn't loneliness. It was simplicity, a kind of quiet resilience that didn't sting. We'd eat together, even if it was just soy sauce and rice. Someone would joke, someone would steal a bite from someone else's bowl. There was laughter, even in scarcity. Now it feels different. Now, soy sauce on rice isn't a placeholder, it's the whole meal. It's not a sacrifice, it's a resignation. It's what I eat when I can't bring myself to do more, when I'm not hungry for food, just for warmth, for proof that I'm not invisible. I think of all the meals I've made over the years, the stews, the sweets, the soups that took all day. I remember wiping my forehead with the back of my hand, smiling at a pot that had finally thickened just right. I remember being proud, being needed. Now I eat while the sky darkens and the house makes its little sounds, creaks in the walls, the slow hum of the refrigerator, the occasional car passing outside. These are my dinner companions now. And I've learned not to expect the phone to ring, not during dinner, not even after. I used to wait. I used to tell myself they'd remember, that they'd think Mom must be eating alone, I should call. But they don't. They think I'm fine. They think I've adjusted. They think I'm strong. And I am, I suppose. But even strong women get tired of swallowing loneliness in spoonfuls. Sometimes I wonder what they'd say if they saw me now bent over a bowl of plain rice. No meat, no garnish, no table set. Would they pity me? Would they feel guilt? Or would they just nod and say, she's always been okay on her own? They don't understand that what I miss isn't the food, it's the ritual, the asking, the presence, the way a simple question, Have you eaten yet can hold more love than 1,000 deliveries? Because that's all I want, really. Not their money, not their gifts, just their attention, their time, their voices in the house, their bowls clinking against mine. But I've learned how to eat in silence. I've learned how to serve myself small portions of acceptance. I've learned how to hold my grief gently like warm rice between tired fingers. And when I pour soy sauce over it, I pretend I'm seasoning something sacred. Not because it's delicious, but because it's mine. Because I'm still here, still feeding myself even in sorrow. Maybe that's what motherhood becomes in the end. Learning to hold the echo after the music stops. Learning to find flavor in memory. Learning to sit alone at the table and still say I'm worth feeding. Even if it's just rice and soy sauce. Even if no one asks if I've eaten. I still ask myself, and I answer. Because I still matter. The rice is gone now, the bowl clean, the house dim. I sit back in my chair, listening to the quiet without flinching. It used to feel like a punishment, this silence, but tonight it feels like a breath, long, steady, mine. I spent decades seasoning meals with love others never had to ask for. My apron caught their hunger, my hands fed their lives, and though they moved on, forgot, turned busy, I remained, a small light in a kitchen they no longer enter. But I no longer need them to arrive to feel real. I no longer need 6 chairs filled to feel full. I have learned to pour gently, to eat slowly, to sit in my own presence without apology. I no longer reach for the phone expecting a message. I no longer boil soup for ghosts. I no longer wait for questions that won't come. Instead, I ask myself, "Are you hungry, my dear?" And I answer with grace, yes, but only for peace. They forgot me, but I remember me. And I eat, with dignity, with quiet, with love that no longer waits to be noticed. Because even when no one asks if I've eaten, I still rise, I still cook, I still live. Not loudly, but fully,